Despite winning the Super Bowl, Nick Sirianni still, I don't think, is getting enough credit. I'm going to tell you why his fingerprints were all over that win on this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. I'm your host, Louie DiBiase, joining you on this Tuesday edition of the show. The first podcast post-Super Bowl night. The Eagles are officially defending Super Bowl champions after a 40-22 win on Sunday over Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, Travis Kelce, and the Kansas City Chiefs. How good it was to see them dominate that team. A historically great football team they destroyed in a Super Bowl. They made a top 2 player of all time look like absolutely nothing. And Jalen Hurts dominated. We know the pass rush dominated. Everybody was great on both sides of the ball. Special teams made plays. Howie Roseman looks like a genius for the historically great roster that he built with little to zero flaws on it. It was, I think, the greatest construction of a roster, one of them at least in NFL history. It's the greatest single offseason I think a GM has ever had. So he deserves so much credit for this Jalen Hurts. I mean, the list goes on and on of who deserves credit. But someone that's not getting enough credit, and I have to put my hands up, I didn't even really talk about him after the Super Bowl win either on yesterday's show when I was talking about all the storylines of this championship win. Nick Sirianni, the Eagles head coach, still, after winning the championship, is like, I don't know, 7th or 8th when it comes about the most talked about headlines after that title win. Like, Nick Sirianni still, I don't think, is getting his flowers in the way he deserves it. And again, I was just so damn excited that night, so I was running on adrenaline, and I felt like, Jalen Hurts and Howie Roseman, like, those were the biggest stories of the night, so you got to feature those two. But Nick, I mean, his fingerprints were all over that win, and it's not getting talked about enough. Not only him, but the entire coaching staff. Like, yes, Howie's construction of the roster was beautiful. The execution from that roster on the field, just kicking a great team's butt in every direction, was great. But the coaching was superb. It was a masterclass. And I think the biggest example of that is something I did hit on a little bit on the show yesterday. It was that, look how everyone was ready to play in that game. Not just the stars, but the role players, the rotational pieces, the backups that had to come in for injuries. The entire team was ready to go. The entire team made plays. And yes, Howie Roseman deserves credit for building one of the deepest teams in NFL history, but the coaches got to get these guys ready to play. The next man up mentality, it's hard when you're sitting on the sidelines and then you're just thrust into a game. It's hard to be solid from the jump, especially if it's a big moment like a playoff game or a Super Bowl. But all year long, this has been the case. I mean, I look at Isaiah Rodgers as the biggest example of when Darius Slay, time after time this year, came in and out of the lineup with an injury, and Rodgers always stepped up when he had to go onto the field. In that Super Bowl, it was the same thing as it's been all year with Fred Johnson and Tyler Steen and Keely Ringo, whoever had to step up and make plays, Grant Calcaterra, Will Shipley, Kenneth Gainwell. These guys always made plays. In the Super Bowl, Jahan Dotson, a guy that's number has been barely called this year, Howie Roseman trades a 3rd-round pick for, and it looks like a bust of a move, has 2 explosive receptions in the first half for 42 yards and nearly scored the first touchdown of the game. Jalux Hunt and Moro Ijoma on the defensive line led the Eagles in pass rush win rate. 2 rotational pieces that are not starters. Mekhi Becton for a while goes out of this game. Tyler Steen walks right into the lineup at right guard. He's been playing different positions all year. Does not skip a beat. Jalen Hurts' protection was incredible on Sunday. Was the offensive line great on the ground? No. But the pass protection was superb. And so Nick Sirianni, Jeff Stoutland, Vic Fangio deserves so much credit for how good, how dominant the youngest defense in football looked all year, including against the Chiefs on Sunday. They made, again, Patrick Mahomes have maybe the worst game of his career, or at least one of them. It's up there with the 2020 Super Bowl as well. He was running for his life. Vic Fangio deserves so much credit. Kellen Moore deserves so much credit. We'll get into Kellen Moore later on in the show. I mean, Christian Parker, the defensive backs coach. Clint Hurt, the defensive line coach. these coaches had not only the stars ready to go all year, including the Super Bowl, but Nick Sirianni did as well. Like, his fingerprints were all over that win because of that. I mean, I'm not even done mentioning role players that stepped up on Sunday. Oren Burks comes in for Nakobe Dean, a backup linebacker, and has one of the 5 highest grades, according to PFF, of any Eagle on Sunday. Was not a liability in coverage like I thought he could be. He had a great game. Tyler Steen, like I said, came in. Avonte Maddox had to come in for a play on 4th down in the second half. He's one-on-one with DeAndre Hopkins in the slot, and I'm screaming watching the game, oh no, Avonte Maddox is out there. That's where they're going. That's where they went. But Avonte made the play. He made the big-time pass deflection. And how cool of a story is that for a team-first guy that gets benched at the bye week for Cooper DeJean, and it was the right move. Avonte, he kind of looked shot in September. He was the weak link of the defense. But Avonte Maddox, who's been here since 2018 and has been a starter pretty much every year, he's been in Philadelphia, just accepted his role, made good plays on special teams, and then when his numbers called in the Super Bowl on 4th down against Patrick Mahomes and DeAndre Hopkins, one of the best receivers of this era, he makes the play. So yeah, of course, the GM has to add the players, right? The top-tier talent, the depth. But the coaches have to put it all together. They have to make it work. And to keep the backups locked in at all times, like, that's coaching. That's Nick Sirianni. That's the staff that he's put together, the assistants that I'm sure a bunch of them, and one already did, we'll get into it, are going to get promotions if they haven't already. So, unlike past regimes, this coaching staff is so good with player development. And it was one of Nick Sirianni's big pros when he came in as the Eagles' new head coach after Indianapolis. Like, yeah, is he the play caller of Doug Peterson? No. But he's the hands-on talent developer, especially the young players. Like, this roster specifically needed this coaching staff led by Nick Sirianni because it was far younger than any team Howie Roseman has ever put together. And Nick Sirianni, like, that's what we said he was going to bring to the table, the player development, especially with young guys. And every young player this year took a step up. And every young player in the biggest game of their life on Sunday against the Chiefs to stop a three-peat, to stop history, stepped up in a huge way. And it wasn't just this game, though. I mean, Will Shipley in the NFC Championship, Oren Burks throughout the playoffs. I mean, there's just been so many instances where rotational pieces or backups all year long had to come into the lineup and they got the job done. And Nick Sirianni, like, he deserves that credit. And I still don't think he's getting enough of it. Vic Fangio does too, and Kellen Moore, Christian Parker, Clint Hurt, Jeff Stoutland, the list goes on and on. But Nick Sirianni's at the forefront of all of that, and he's barely being talked about still, I feel like, this week. And I can't stop thinking about that meeting he had after the bye week with the linemen to change this season around. It's one of the biggest moments in franchise history, and it was led by the head coach. He said, I give the players the power. They have the trust in Nick Sirianni to come to him in that kind of moment and say, hey, we need to fix this thing. The culture is set like that because of Nick Sirianni. And without that moment, they don't get to this moment. They don't win that championship. He is a special head coach that does things you can't always quantify through numbers and through film study. But Nick Sirianni's fingerprints were all over that championship win. His fingerprints have been all over this championship season. And I've never been more wrong about a coach in my life. I mean, after week 4, you guys remember, after the Tampa loss, I wanted him fired. And I'll raise my hand to say I'm going to eat crow. I was wrong. Nick Sirianni deserves even more credit than he deserves all the credit in the world for this season. He deserves my apology, but he deserves even more credit than what he's getting right now for being a Super Bowl head coach, for the impact he had specifically in that football game. And I still don't think he's getting it. Nick Sirianni deserves his flowers. And so do 3 players that I don't think the Eagles would have ever gotten to this moment as Super Bowl 59 champions without these 3 guys being added. They really, I think, started the golden era of Eagles football. I'll tell you who those 3 players are coming up next, right here on Locked On Eagles. This episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by PrizePicks. Football season, it may be over, but basketball, it's in full swing, and there's no better way to stay in the game than with PrizePicks, the best place to play daily fantasy sports. With PrizePicks, you pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. This week, for example, I'm looking at LeBron James for more than 29 points with Luka Doncic in LA now. The best part, PrizePicks is quick and easy. You can set your lineup in less than 60 seconds, and they're fast and secure withdrawals, meaning I get my winnings in as little as 15 minutes. Plus, I love their weekly promos like Taco Tuesday, where you get discounted player projections for even better value. Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL. You're going to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. Run your game. Thanks as always for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. The Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl champions 2 times now in under a decade. How blessed are we? I mean, that's incredible. If you would have told 10-year-old me that I'd be seeing 2 championships before I'm 30, he would have signed up for that. 2 times in under 20 or under 10 years where they beat the 2 greatest players in NFL history by putting up at least 40 points in both games. Historically great performances from the quarterback, Nick Foles, now Jalen Hurts. We live blessed lives. We live blessed lives, guys. I mean, that's a fact. That's a fact. And we wouldn't be here talking about this Super Bowl win if it wasn't for 3 guys. And I don't want to say without these 3, like these 3 started it, because you did have Lane Johnson still heading into this new era after the rubble of 2020. You still had Brandon Graham. You drafted Jalen Hurts. That's really where it all started, with the franchise quarterback becoming the guy when really nobody expected it. And the Eagles didn't expect it either. Jeffrey Lurie can say they envisioned this from the start. I don't believe them. I think they drafted him to be the backup. But Jalen Hurts is where it started. However, Jalen Hurts doesn't become the quarterback he is. This defense doesn't become the complete unit it is without 3 players that I think propelled the Eagles. Like, yes, you had a foundation already in place that was brewing. Lane Johnson, Brandon Graham, even you got to give credit to Fletcher Cox and Jason Kelsey, Jalen Hurts drafted. But to get to that next level from where they were in 2018, 2019, even 2021, they needed the elevation and the additions of 2 receivers and a cornerback. Darius Slay, who was added during that 2020 debacle. DeVonta Smith, who was really Howie Roseman's first draft pick in this new era. And then trading for A.J. Brown. Without those 3, like that's really where this dominant run started. Like a lot of those guys you had already had from the previous core, the previous runs, the Doug Peterson, Carson Wentz era. But those 3 guys, I just want to give them their flowers. Because the Eagles were, and it's also the position they play. Wide receiver and corner. From, I would say, at corner, it's been forever. So in my entire life as an Eagles fan and analyst, the cornerback position has always been a problem in Philly. Darius Slay comes in 2020, and he brings stability and top-tier play there that we've never seen. Or at least I had never seen since Asante Samuel when I was a kid. Because I wasn't young enough, or I'm not old enough for the Lito Shepherd, Troy Vincent, Bobby Taylor era, Eric Allen. I didn't see any of these guys play. For all of my life, the Eagles cornerback play was mid, if that at best. And Darius Slay came in and brought so much stability, top-tier all-pro seasons like 2021, Pro Bowl year in 2022. What he did this year, bouncing back at age 34, one of the most underrated players on the roster, but also underrated as a captain and as a leader, helping Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell as their mentor, helping them have historically great rookie seasons. You wouldn't be hoisting this Lombardi, the second Lombardi trophy in under a decade without Darius Slay, and especially without DeVonta Smith and A.J. Brown. Say what you want about Saquon Barkley turning this offense around in 2024 and taking them to the next level. Like, he was that final missing piece. But DeVonta Smith and A.J. Brown, they're the main reason that your franchise quarterback, Jalen Hurts, was able to take the step that he did in 2022 to now be a Super Bowl MVP. He's not here without DeVonta Smith and A.J. Brown. And that was one of my favorite parts of that Super Bowl win was watching A.J. Brown, DeVonta Smith catch those touchdowns. DeVonta Smith dominated in this game. 69 yards, 4 receptions, and a touchdown, multiple third down conversions. He's, to me, one of the most clutch players in Eagles history. He's going to go down as one of the best big game receivers of all time, not just in the NFL, but in college. He's one of 5 players ever to win all 3, the Triple Crown of the Heisman, a national championship, and a Super Bowl. When they took him in 2021, they finally got out of wide receiver hell. And then when they added A.J. Brown in 2022, it took the offense to another level. Like we say Saquon Barkley did that. It was really A.J. Brown. Like him and DeVonta started this new dominant era of Eagles offense. No more Jalen Reagor and Travis Fulgham having to talk ourselves into these receivers that are just not it. DeVonta Smith, A.J. Brown, and Darius Slay, they finally brought peace and freedom, to quote Anakin Skywalker in Revenge of the Sith, to the new empire. They brought stability to two positions that the Eagles were just always in turmoil and the revolving door of players coming in and out of the lineup. It was just hell all the time at receiver and corner. And to see A.J. Brown and DeVonta Smith pour Gatorade on Nick Sirianni Sunday night to win the Super Bowl, to celebrate, it just felt right. Because without those two, like Jalen Hurts does not have that moment. And of course, I'm not trying to discredit all the work Jalen has put in as a pocket passer, as a leader, as a clutch player, to evolve his game year after year. Like Jalen Hurts, of course, he deserves most of the credit for the player he is today, but he doesn't get there without talent around him. We saw the last franchise quarterback, Carson Wentz, a huge reason for his historically bad regression in 2020 was because he didn't have players like DeVonta Smith and A.J. Brown. It's not the only reason, but it was one of the main reasons. Without DeVonta and A.J., Jalen doesn't take the step he does and become the player he's been from 2022 to 2024. And I just want to give those guys their flowers as well because they were big time in the Super Bowl. A.J. Brown, 43 yards for a touchdown as well. Had a deep ball negated off a terrible penalty in the first quarter. So he should have had over 70 yards receiving as well. So him and DeVonta would have been on an even track record there in the Super Bowl. I just, without those guys, we're not where we are today. And Darius Slay might go out as a champion in Philadelphia. He's going to play one more year next year, it sounds like, before he retires. I don't know if it's going to be in Philly. I think he can play one more year. Like, I think he's still got it in him, but they have a lot of young corners. They probably want to see what they have in Akili Ringo or maybe Isaiah Rodgers. But if this is it, Darius Slay, tip of the cap. We haven't talked about you enough on the show this year. You brought stability to the cornerback position, all pro seasons, and you passed the torch this year beautifully to Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. And he was one of the guys I was happiest for seeing him hold that Lombardi trophy because when he came in to Philly in 2020, he had to have been so excited, like, oh, I'm finally leaving Detroit where they just never win. I'm coming to a team that won a Super Bowl a few years ago. They've made the playoffs in 3 years straight, and now I'm getting traded to them, and then they follow up with a 4-win season. And then in 2021, they're okay as a wild card team. I feel so happy for Darius Slay, the leader he has been. He's been a great captain. For him to get this trophy, it's awesome, especially because they were so close in 2022. And then last year, we thought he was going to be gone, right? He gets cut. He's going to sign with Baltimore, but the Eagles find a way instead to restructure the contract and bring him back. And without Darius Slay, like, I'm not going to say Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean don't have the years they do, but he was a massive reason for their big years. And he had a huge season in his own right. I mean, he made some big plays this year. The game-winning pass deflection against Carolina. I mean, he made big plays time after time against Detroit, or I should say LA in the playoffs. Multiple big pass deflections in the second half of a close game. I keep thinking about that Rams game because they were close. This year was so close to not happening. This Super Bowl was so close to not happening. The Rams are marching down the field with a few minutes to go. Matt Stafford looks like he's about to score and end the Eagles season. Jalen Carter made the play of the year with the sack on Stafford on third down. But Darius Slay was the one all over Puka Nacua and forced the pass deflection, the forced incompletion that propelled the Eagles into the NFC title. So those guys deserve so much credit. DeVonta Smith, I mean, the all-time leader in Eagles receiving yards in the playoffs. A.J. Brown, those three. Without them, the golden era of Eagles football, I don't think it's happening. And they finally have stability at two positions that are so crucial in the modern day NFL that they just couldn't get right. So props to DeVonta, props to Slay, props to A.J. Brown as well. All right, guys, coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles, Kellen Moore is the new head coach of the New Orleans Saints. What should the Eagles do at play caller in 2025? I'll tell you coming up right here on Locked On Eagles. This episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether I'm backing up my team for a late game rally or picking up a player to hit a clutch three like LeBron James. I always love betting on LeBron. That's my favorite player ever. Him and Russell Westbrook, I bet a lot of money on those two. I never feel like I missed my chance through FanDuel. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, so Kellen Moore, officially the new New Orleans Saints head coach. The Philadelphia Eagles will be on their 6th play caller in the Jalen Hurts era. Jalen's going to need a new offensive coordinator, a new play caller. That's been the theme every year he's been in Philly. That's been the theme of his career, though. Alabama, there was change. Then he goes to Oklahoma. Like, he just has never really had stability with the play caller. That relationship has just always been changing with different people coming in and out of the door. That's life as a Super Bowl contender and a Super Bowl winner when your head coach is not a play caller. Like, this will continue to happen. I will say, as frustrating as that is, props to Kellen Moore. Like, I'm not upset he took this job. There's only 32 of these in the NFL. These opportunities don't come around often. Like, look at Bobby Slowick from the Houston Texans. He was a hot head coaching candidate last year after the season Stroud had as a rookie. And then this year, 1 year later, he gets fired as the Texans offensive coordinator. So I get it for Kellen Moore. And why I'm so happy with Kellen Moore and happy for him that he got this job is that, and I'm not bitter, despite the play calling, instability, because I want that for sure. It's because he was so good in the playoffs for this team. Like, he did not let this process become a huge distraction. His 2 best play calling games maybe all year, and Pittsburgh was up there for sure. There was a lot of games that he really stepped up this year. But I think the NFC title against Washington and the passing game plan for Kansas City, it was incredible. I think maybe it probably was the 2 best games that Kellen Moore has had this year. And he did not let that process become a distraction, unlike somebody in 2022, Jonathan Gannon, with the Arizona Cardinals head coaching job. He absolutely let that be a distraction, and you could tell his prep for the Chiefs in the Super Bowl was just not there. They were not ready for that matchup. And Kellen Moore, he didn't let that become a thing. He didn't let that get in the way of the Eagles' Super Bowl aspirations. And so, happy for Kellen Moore, tip of the cap. When it comes to who should be their next head coach, or I should say their next play caller, the next offensive coordinator, I don't want it to be an internal promotion. I know Kevin Patullo is going to be the betting favorite, and I like Patullo. I think he would kind of present a stable force, like some consistency within the scheme, because he did help transition from the Nick Sirianni offense to the Kellen Moore offense, and he helped marry the two, ideologies, the 2 different offensive philosophies, and combined it into what we saw in 2024. So Patullo, I think, is a good coach. He's also an assistant head coach. So with Nick, he's got a lot of responsibilities. He helps with the passing game as well. So I think there are some pros to Kevin Patullo. Again, there's that stability. He has knowledge of the Kellen Moore offense and the Nick Sirianni offense. So you can try to keep that in place for next year. But at the same time, he's never been a play caller before. I don't know if I want a first-time play caller again, like they had with Brian Johnson 2 years ago in 2023. And just the internal promotions have just never worked in Philly. When they lost Frank Reich after the 2017 Super Bowl and Doug Peterson promoted Mike Groh, it was a disaster. And then 2 years ago, in 2022, 2023, they lose Shane Steichen to the Colts. Nick Sirianni promotes Brian Johnson as the new play caller, the new OC. And it was a disaster again. It didn't work. It wasn't as much of a disaster as it was with Mike Groh, but it didn't work. So I don't want to say that every internal promotion is bad and they should never take that route if you do have good candidates. Like, I think the justification for Brian Johnson 2 years ago was just the relationship he had with Jalen Hurts. He was seen as a young, up-and-coming head coach that was probably going to get a head coaching job or a play calling job elsewhere if you didn't give it to him. So I understood the logic there. But with Patullo, I don't know. I think there are a lot of good candidates out there right now that have called plays that could be head coaches soon, that could see Philadelphia as an ideal, like, kind of leapfrog destination. Jalen Hurts, an elite offensive line, elite weapons. Like, you're going to drag in the best of the best every single year because they're going to want to call plays for this team because it's been proven to get you head coaching gigs. So I just think the options, if it's Kevin Patullo versus the field, I'd take the field. Like, again, I'm not saying Patullo is going to be the next Mike Groh. I'm not saying you should never promote internally. But when it comes to what Patullo has to offer versus just the field of an outside hire and all the options that Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni have to choose from here, I would take the field. I would prefer the outside hire. So there's a lot of guys out there. There's a lot of young coordinators. If you want to bring in a Slowick, maybe a Josh McCown, somebody from Sean McVay or Kyle Shanahan type of offense, I'm not sure. I want to take a look and definitely do more research on, all of the candidates that are out there. But I know Patullo has some good things to offer. I know he's probably the favorite right now for a lot of the reasons that I laid out when it comes to the stability and continuity aspect of all of this. But I would definitely lean in the opposite direction of going with an outside hire. But Kellen Moore, again, wish he could stay in Philadelphia, but the proof is in the pudding with him. I mean, he called a hell of a 2 championship games back-to-back, and the Saints recognize that. He's a play caller. He's a former quarterback. He's young. He's everything the NFL looks for now in a head coach. Like, he's the blueprint that the majority of teams follow when it comes to their hiring process. So I hate to see him go. I think he helped Jalen Hurts develop tremendously this year and evolve as a quarterback. But at the same time, I'm not surprised that he's gone. And I think he's going to do a good job in New Orleans. So it'll be interesting to follow this process. It's a big decision again, though. Again, the Eagles' offense has regressed multiple years in the last decade when they lost their play caller and internally promoted. So this is a big decision for Howie Roseman, for Nick Sirianni. It's a big moment to get this right this time, to kind of avenge the decisions that you've made in these kind of situations in the past. It's a moment they don't have a great track record in, and I think they need to really take this seriously and do their due diligence with everybody, explore all options. I don't think the Eagles' offense will regress next year with the talent they have and the way Jalen Hurts is playing right now, but it's an important play caller. That relationship with the quarterback is extremely important, so you got to get it right. And I would go on the outside. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. We still got 3 more shows for you this week and all day, every day throughout the regular season, throughout the playoffs, throughout the offseason. We're never going to stop being your everydayers Monday through Friday right here on Locked On Eagles. Until tomorrow, thanks as always for downloading, watching, and listening. And let's go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly. Super Bowl champions, baby.